Hey there, are you a project manager looking to ace your next interview? Look no further. Welcome to Musk Ask Panda channel. I'm going to show you the 10 most commonly asked project manager interview questions and reveal the best practical strategies to answer them professionally. This question can cover a range of topics such as project planning, risk management, team communication, leadership style, and project execution. I have also included sample answer for intersection or follow-up question that the interviewer may ask for deep dive. Trust me, you want that deep dive with your answer. That shows the interviewer is interested in you. First question. Tell me about your experience as a project manager. The purpose of this question is to assess your project management experience, knowledge, and expertise. The interviewer wants to know if you have necessary skill to manage and lead projects successfully. When you give detail on your experience, there are 5 key things to consider. First, brief overview, roles and responsibility, highlight your achievement, leadership and communication skills, and connect the job requirements. Let's begin to start with the first tip. Start with the brief overview of your project management experience and the types of projects you have managed. Second, describe your role and responsibility as a project manager, including planning, budgeting, resource allocation, risk management, and stakeholder management. Third, highlight your achievement and quantify them with a number to demonstrate your success as a project manager. Fourth, emphasize your leadership and communication skills, including how you motivated and led your team, handle conflicts and challenges, and communicated with stakeholders. Finally, make sure to connect your experience to the specific job requirements and highlight why you are a strong fit for the role. Let's look into sample conversion. Interviewer, can you tell me about your experience as a project manager? Candidate, sure, I would happy to. In my previous role, I managed a software development project for a large retail company. The project involved developing a new point of sale system for the company's stores across the country. As a project manager, I worked closely with the development team to define project milestones, allocate resources, manage risk, and communicate project progress to stakeholders. Through my leadership and effective project management skills, we were able to deliver the project on time and within budget. The new point of sale system resulted in 20% increase in transaction speed and 15% increase in overall sales for the company. After listening to this, interviewer responds, "That's impressive. Can you tell me more about your role and responsibility as a project manager?" Follow-up question like this can come up at any time. One can prepare with the following. As a project manager, I was responsible for defining project goals, scope, and deliverables, developing a project plans, allocating resources, managing project risk, and communicating project progress to stakeholders. I also led the project team, which involved motivating team members, managing conflicts, and providing guidance and support throughout the project lifecycle. Interviewer, can you give an example of the project where you had to manage unexpected challenges? Candidate, yes, that was a project where we faced unexpected delays due to a key member's sudden illness. I had to quickly assess the situation, adjust project plan, and relocate resources to ensure that project stayed on track. By implementing this contingency plan, we were able to successfully complete the project on time and within budget. Interviewer, great, it sounds like you have the skills and experience we were looking for the project manager. Thank you for sharing your experience with me. Candidate, thank you for the opportunity to discuss my experience. How do you manage competing priorities in a project? In this question, interviewer wants to assess your ability to manage competing priorities in a project, a critical skill for a project manager. When managing competing priorities in a project, there are 3 things I always keep in mind: prioritization, communication, and flexibility. Firstly, I want to make sure prioritizing competing priority based on their impact on a project's goal and objectives. This involves involving project team members and stakeholders in the process to ensure everyone is aligned and in agreement on priorities. Secondly, effective communication is crucial. I make sure to communicate the priorities and the plan for managing them to the project team and stakeholders. This involves providing regular updates and ensuring that everyone is aware of any changes in priorities. Lastly, I remain flexible and adjust the project plan as necessary to address changes in priorities. I proactively monitor the project and adjust the plan to ensure that the project goals are met. By prioritizing, communicating, and remaining flexible, I can successfully manage competing priorities in a project. Interviewer, how do you manage competing priorities in a project? Candidate, well, let me give you an example of a project I managed recently. We had several competing priorities that needed to be addressed. Interviewer, can you give me an example of specific competing priority and how you managed it? Candidate, sure. One example was when we received a request to add a new feature to the project scope, which would require additional time and resources. At the same time, we had an existing feature that needed to be fixed to prevent delays. My task was to manage these competing priorities and ensure that the project goals were met. To manage these competing priorities, I prioritized the tasks based on their impact on the project's goal and objectives. I involved the project team members and stakeholders in the process to ensure the alignment and agreement on priorities. I also communicated the priorities and plan for managing them to the project team and stakeholders, and I provided regular updates on progress. Interviewer, can you give an example of how you communicated the company priorities and plan to the team? Candidate, of course, I communicated priorities and the plan through a combination of meetings, emails, and project management software. I made sure to clearly articulate the reason behind the priorities and expected impact on the project's goals and objectives. As a result of prioritizing, communicating, and involving team members, we were able to successfully manage the competing priorities and ensure that the project's goals were met on time and within the budget. Overall, I believe that the effective prioritization, communication, and involvement of the team member are crucial to managing competing priorities in a project. Can you describe your approach to risk management? The question is to assess the candidate's ability to identify, assess, and mitigate risks that may arise during a project. It also aims to evaluate the candidate's ability to communicate effectively with stakeholders and to demonstrate their experience in managing risk in project environment. There are three key things that I always keep in mind. Define your overall approach, provide an example, and highlight your communication skills. In the first step, start by explaining your approach to the risk management. This could include identifying, assessing, and mitigating a risk, as well as regularly reviewing and updating risk management plans. In the second tip, provide an example of a specific risk that you manage and how you approach it. Be sure to explain the steps you took to assess the risk, develop a mitigate plan, and monitor its progress. In the last tip, good risk management involves effective communication with all stakeholders. Be sure to highlight your ability to clearly communicate risk, mitigate plans, and progress updates to both internal team members and external stakeholders. Interviewer, can you describe your approach to risk management? Candidate, sure, I would be happy to. My approach to risk management involves a few key steps. Firstly, I like to identify and assess potential risk at the beginning of the project. This involves looking at the likelihood and impact of each risk on the project success. Secondly, I prioritize and develop a plan to mitigate or avoid the most significant risk. This plan includes us assigning responsibility and creating a timeline for implementation. Lastly, I continuously monitor and review the project risk throughout the project's lifecycle to ensure that the new risks are identified and the risk management plan is still relevant. Interviewer, that sounds like a thorough approach. Can you give me an example of time when you used this approach to manage project risk? Candidate, yes. In my previous role as a project manager, we identified risk of not meeting a critical deadline due to the potential supply chain issues. I developed a risk management plan that included diversifying our supplier, increasing communication with them, and building a buffer into a schedule to allow for any delays. This approach helped us successfully deliver the project on time despite the initial risk. Tell me about a time when you had to deal with a difficult stakeholder. The purpose of this question is to assess candidates' ability to handle difficult situations and effectively manage stakeholders' relationships, which are crucial to success of any project. There are three key things that I always keep in mind: context and the nature of concern, step you took to address, and the outcome of the situation. In the first step, begin by describing the context and the nature of the stakeholder's concern or issues. Be specific about the challenges you face, but avoid dwelling on a negative aspect of your situation. In the second tip, explain the steps you took to address the stakeholder's concern. This could include setting up meetings to discuss their concern, actively listening to their feedback, and developing a plan to address this issue while also keeping on their projects in the mind. Finally, describe the outcome of the situation, highlighting any successful strategy you used to manage the stakeholder relationship and maintain the project's momentum. Make sure to emphasize what you learned from the experience and how you have used your knowledge to improve the stakeholder management skills. Interviewer, can you tell me about a time when you had to deal with difficult stakeholder? Candidate, in my previous role as a project manager at XYZ company, I was responsible for managing a software development project for a major client. One of the stakeholders was very demanding and had very high expectation, which was causing a friction and delays in the project. To address this issue, I scheduled a meeting with stakeholders to discuss their concerns and expectations. I listened carefully to their feedback and concerns and worked with my team to come up with a plan to address them. As a result of this effort, we were able to establish a better working relationship with the stakeholder, improve communication and collaboration, and ultimately deliver the project on time within the budget. Interviewer, that's a great example. Can you tell me more about the specific steps you took to address the stakeholder concerns? Candidate, sure, I would be happy to. One of the key steps I took was to establish clear line of communication with the stakeholder, which helped to build trust and reduce the likelihood of misunderstandings. I also made sure to keep the stakeholders informed of our progress and any issues that arose, so that we could work together to resolve them in a timely manner. Interviewer, that sounds like a very effective approach. Can you give me an example of specific issues or challenges that arose during the project and how you and the stakeholder worked together to resolve it? Candidate, absolutely. One of the examples that comes to my mind is when the stakeholder requested a major change to the project scope, which had the potential to significantly impact our timeline and budget. I worked with the stakeholder to carefully evaluate the impact of the proposed change, and we were able to come up with a solution that satisfied their needs while minimizing the impact of the project as a whole. How do you ensure effective communication with your project team? The purpose of this question is to assess candidates' ability to communicate effectively with their team members, which is crucial to the success of any project. There are three key things that I always keep in mind: establish a communication plan, foster an open and collaborative environment, and utilizing communication technology. The first step is a project manager should establish a communication plan that outlines the frequency and the mode of communication to be used among team members. This plan should be shared with the entire team to ensure that everyone is aware of expectation around the communication. Second tip, encourage team members to speak up and share their ideas and concerns. As a project manager, it is important to create an environment that fosters open communication and collaboration. This can be achieved by actively listening to team members and valuing their input. Lastly, there are many tools available for project managers to facilitate effective communication, including email, instant messaging, video conferencing, and project management software. Utilize this tool to streamline communication and ensure that everyone is on the same page. Interviewer, how do you ensure effective communication with your project team? Candidate, well, there was a time when I was working on a project with a team of 5 people, and we were falling behind the schedule due to the miscommunication. I realized that we needed to have more structured communication approach to stay on track. I started by scheduling a regular team meetings to discuss progress and address any concerns. I also created a shared document that outlined everyone's responsibility and deadlines, which helped to ensure that everyone was on the same page. Additionally, I encouraged team members to communicate with each other directly if they had any questions or issues, rather than going through me as a project manager. By implementing this measure, we were able to improve communication and stay on track with our project timeline. Interviewer: that's great. Can you give an example of specific time when this approach helped to resolve a communication issue? Candidate: sure. There was a point where one team member was unclear on their project role, which was causing confusion and delays. By referring to the shared document and having open discussion about expectation, we were able to clarify the responsibilities and getting back on the track. Interviewer: that's a great example. How do you handle communication challenges when they arise? Candidate: I believe in being proactive rather than reactive. So I always try to anticipate potential communication issues and address them before they become a major problem. I also encourage open and honest communication and make sure that everyone on the team feels comfortable expressing their concerns on asking questions. Additionally, I always looking for the opportunities to improve communication processes and making them more efficient. What is your leadership style? The purpose of this question is to understand the candidate's leadership style and how they approach leading a team. It provides insight into ability to motivate, inspire, and guide their team towards achieving their goals. There are 3 key things that I always keep in mind. Explain your leadership style, provide examples, and emphasize the impact of your leadership. First tip: begin by explaining your leadership style, whether it's a transformational, situational, or servant leadership. Describe the approach you take in leading the team and the principle that guides your decision-making process. In the second tip, back up your leadership style with example of how you have successfully led the teams in the past. This can be from your professional experience or personal life, such as leading a volunteer group or coaching a sports team. Lastly, describe how your leadership style has had positive impact on the team and the project success. This can include metrics such as meeting deadlines, improving the team morale, and increasing productivity. Show that your leadership style is effective in achieving results and getting the best out of your team. But interviewer: what is your leadership style? Candidate: my leadership style is mix of transformational and servant leadership. I believe in empowering my team members and providing them with necessary resources and support to achieve their goals. I also encourage open communication and collaboration, and I also make sure to listen to everyone's idea and suggestion. Interviewer: could you provide an example of how you have used this leadership style in the past? Candidate: yes, in my previous role as a project manager, I implemented a new process that involved more collaboration between departments. I had several meetings with key stakeholders to gather input and insights, and I encouraged everyone to share their thoughts and ideas. By doing so, we were able to identify potential roadblocks early on and come up with solutions as a team. Interviewer: how do you adapt your leadership style to different team members? Candidate: I believe in treating everyone as an individual and understanding their unique strength and weakness. Some team members may require more guidance and support, while others may prefer more autonomy. As a leader, it's important to be flexible and adaptable to each team member's need and preference, and I make sure to have regular check-ins to provide feedback and make adjustments as needed. Tell me about a project that didn't go as planned. The purpose of this question is to understand how you handle unexpected situations and setbacks, your problem-solving skills, and your ability to learn from mistakes. There are key things that I always keep in mind. Explain the context and goals, describe the specific challenges, and share how you analyze the situation. The first step: explain the context and the goal of the project, including what was supposed to happen and what actually happened. Secondly, describe the specific challenges or obstacles that cause the project to deviate from its planned course. Lastly, share how you analyze the situation, identify the root cause of the issues, and develop a plan to get the project back on track or to prevent a similar issue in the future. Be sure to highlight any lesson learned and improvement made. Interviewer, tell me about a project that didn't go as planned. Candidate, sure, one project that comes to my mind is when I was leading a team to launch a new product. Our team encountered several unforeseen technical issues that delayed our timeline significantly, causing us to miss our launch date. To overcome this setback, I immediately called a team meeting to assess the situation and identify the root cause of the technical issues. We worked together to come up with a new plan, which included bringing in additional technical resources and updating our launch date. I also communicated the changes and new expectation with our stakeholders so everyone was on the same page. How do you manage change requests in a project? The purpose of this question is to understand the candidate's approach to managing change requests in a project, including their ability to prioritize, assess impact, and communicate change effectively to stakeholders. Here are the three key things that I always keep in mind. Have a change process in place, communicate proactively, and be adaptable. In the first tip, a strong change management process is critical to managing the change request effectively. Candidates should be able to explain how they prioritize and assess the change request, who is involved in the decision-making process, and how they communicate change to stakeholders. In the second tip, communication is the key to the managing change request. Candidates should be able to describe their approach to communicating with stakeholders about changes, including what information is shared and when. They should also explain how they manage stakeholders' expectation and ensure that everyone is on the same page. In the last tip, project managers should be able to adapt and able to adjust to changes quickly. Candidates should be able to describe how they handle unexpected change requests, including how they assess the impact of the change and adjust the project timeline and budgets as needed. They should be able to provide example on how they have successfully managed the change request in the past. How do you manage change requests in a project? Candidate. In my experience, managing change requests is critical aspect of project management. I have three-step approach to managing change requests effectively. Firstly, I establish a formal change control process at the outset of the project. This process outlines how changes to the scope, schedule, and budget will be identified, evaluated, and approved. It helps me to ensure that all stakeholders understand the process and follow it to the requested changes. Secondly, I prioritize change requests based on their impact of the project. If a change request is likely to have a significant impact on a scope, schedule, or budget, then I ensure that it is evaluated and approved by appropriate stakeholders. However, if a change request is a minor, then I may choose to handle it myself without disturbing the project schedule. Finally, I communicate the change request to the project team and all stakeholders. This helps to ensure that everyone is aware of the changes and their impact on the project. Additionally, I ensure that the project plan is updated to reflect the changes and the team is informed of any new deadlines or milestones that they may have been introduced. Interviewer, can you give me an example of how you have managed change requests on the project in the past? Candidate, sure. In my last project, we received a change request from one of our stakeholders to include additional functionality in the project deliverable. While the request was feasible, it had a significant impact on the project schedule and budget. We evaluated the change request, prioritized it against other requests, and then presented it to the steering committee for approval. After approval, we updated the project plan and communicated the changes to the team and stakeholders. This helped to ensure that everyone was aware of the change and we were able to deliver the project on time and within budget. Can you describe a project management tool or technique you find useful? The purpose of this question is to assess the candidate's knowledge of different project management tools and techniques, as well as their ability to apply them effectively in project management scenario. There are three key things that I always keep in mind. Choose a tool or technique that you are familiar with, how the tool or technique help you, highlight the benefit of the results. The first tip, choose a tool or technique that you are familiar with and how have you used in previous project. This will demonstrate your practical experience and ability to apply it effectively. Second tip, explain how the tool or technique help you in managing a specific project or situation. Be specific about the challenges you faced and how the tool or technique help you overcome them. The last tip is highlight the benefits and the results that were achieved as a result of using this tool or technique. This will demonstrate the value you bring as a project manager and your ability to achieve project objectives using the right tools and techniques. Can you describe a project management tool or technique you find useful? Candidate, I would say one of the most useful project management tool I have used is the Gantt chart. It's a visual tool that allows you to track the progress of the project and helps you to identify any potential delays or roadblocks. Interviewer, can you give me an example of how you used the Gantt chart in your project? Candidate, sure. In a recent project, we used Gantt chart to track the progress of development team. By breaking the project down into smaller tasks and assigning deadlines to each task, we were able to identify any potential delay early on and take corrective action. The Gantt chart allowed us to see the progress of each task and how it related to the overall project timeline. Interviewer, so it sounds like a Gantt chart was an effective tool for managing the project. Are there any other project management tool or techniques that you find useful? Candidate, yes. Another tool that I found useful is the risk management plan. It allows you to identify potential risks that may arise during the project and develop a plan to mitigate those risks. By identifying this risk early on and having a plan in place, you can reduce the impact of this risk on the project and helps to ensure the successful outcome. How do you ensure the project documentation is up to date and accessible to all stakeholders? And what tools or platforms do you use to manage project information? The purpose of this question is to assess the candidate's knowledge and experience in managing project documentation, ensuring its accuracy and accessibility to all stakeholders. It's also aimed to understand what tools or platform they use to manage project information and their level of comfort with the technology. There are three key things that I always keep in mind. Importance of accurate and up-to-date information. Describe the tools or platform you use to manage. Process for keeping the project documentation up to date. The first step, start by explaining the importance of accurate, up-to-date documentation. The second tips I would like to describe is describe the tool or platform you use to manage project information, such as project management software or cloud-based storage solution. Finally, explain your process for keeping the project documentation up to date and ensuring that it's accessible to all stakeholders. Interviewer, how do you ensure that the project documentation is up to date and accessible to all stakeholders, and what tools or platform do you use to manage project information? Candidate, ensuring that project documentation is up to date and accessible to all stakeholders is critical to the success of the project. To manage project information, I use project management software such as Asana, Trello, or Jira, depending on the needs and the preference of the team. This tool facilitates collaboration and make it easier to keep documentation up to date and accessible to stakeholders. For example, they provide a centralized location for all project-related documentation and allow stakeholders to access the information they need at any time. With that, thank you for tuning in to the Must Ask Panda channel. If you find it useful and like to see more videos like this one, please subscribe.